Good morning, everyone. Good morning for those who are watching us through the internet. Today is a beautiful Sunday here in Toronto. Um, so today's lecture is going to be given by our friend Tiago, and the theme is many are called, but a few are chosen. But before that, we are going to have our initial reading and initial prayer done by our friend Natalia. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your body deserves to be kept healthy. To despise it for any reason is an act of rebellion against God, who has given it to us for the purpose of inner growth and moral development, without adorning it excessively or living for it as some people do. Guard and protect it. Love it to the length of its useful life. The body is the donkey which carries the soul on earth, as Saint Francis of Assisi taught, and deserves tenderness and affection. This is from Happy Life by Divaldo Pereira Franco and by Joana de Angelis. And for our initial prayer, let's close our eyes. And thank God that we are here another day and we can learn and ask that our friend Tiago has all the guidance to give us the lecture today, and we can absorb it. Thank you. So be it.
Good morning. Thank you for coming today, and good morning to everyone online. Our task today is to have some reflections on one of the chapters of the Gospel according to Spiritism. This is, I believe, chapter 18. Many are called, but few are chosen. And when reading and rereading this chapter, I came to the conclusion that if you're gonna summarize this chapter in one word, I think the word would be responsibility. And maybe you guys will come to the same conclusion as myself towards the end of the lecture. So let's start. Yeah, of course it's not. Okay. So the chapter starts with one of the parables of Jesus, which is the parable of the wedding feast. And if you ever read or heard about this parable before, you may think that this is one of the most strange to our ears and maybe one of the most difficult to grasp the meaning when you first hear about it. So I'm gonna dare to tell this parable, this story, in my own way. So imagine that we are all here living in a kingdom. We're all living in a kingdom, and in this kingdom there is a king, and the king then the king's son is getting married. So that obviously is a reason of joy and happiness for the king. So he decides to share his happiness with everyone in the realm. And he decides to do that by organizing a wedding feast for this royal wedding. So he asks his servants to go all around the realm and invite each and every one of the people in the realm to go to this wedding feast. So the servants, the messengers go all around, and imagine that they will knock on our door and say, hey, so our king is inviting you to this royal wedding. The king asked to say that he has ordered to prepare the best cattle, the best food in the realm with the best chefs, the top chefs in the realm. You're gonna have the finest drinks, amazing music. You're gonna have lots of fun. Everything's free. You just come to the wedding feast to celebrate my son's wedding. And imagine the situation if you were to be invited to a royal wedding, would you say, what would you say? I think each one of us would say yes, right? Because a royal wedding is something that doesn't happen every day, right? You would have that opportunity maybe again in your lifetime. So I think I would say yes, at least on this situation. I mean, I would, prepare myself to go. But in the story, um, some people decide to say no. They were not very interested in going to the royal wedding. Some people said, I think I have to take care of my lands. My lands need my attention, and I cannot stop one night to go to this party. I'm sorry, I don't want to go. Some people said, "Oh, I need to take care of my business because my I need to take care of my money, see how much is going in and going out. I need to give attention to that, and I can't stop one night to go to this party." But what becomes even more strange is that some people not only were not interested in going to this royal wedding, but they were angry that they were invited. So some of them actually captured the servants of the king and killed them. And that obviously, when reached the ears of the king, made him very upset and angry. So in the story, the king orders to invade the lands of the people who kill his servants and burn the cities and burn their properties. After all this, drama, let's put it that way, the king was still insistent of having the wedding feast because, well, this was his son's wedding, so he really wants to celebrate. So he goes again to his servants and orders them to go outside of the walls of the realm. He says, "Go everywhere that you can go and invite everyone that you meet. Go to the crossroads and invite everyone, no matter which realm they come from, what they believe. Just invite everyone to the wedding feast." And then at that point, many people said yes, and the event was a success because the hall of the castle was filled up with people. Everybody was having fun. Everybody was eating, everybody was drinking, talking to each other. And you know that in weddings, there's always this formality piece, and you can imagine that in a royal wedding. So at some point, the king uh, goes into the hall and he is going to greet his invitees, right? He's going to talk to each and every one of them. And at that point, he lays eyes at someone who is not dressed appropriately, someone who is not wearing a wedding garment. And the king goes to that person and says, "My friend, how did you enter here without wearing a wedding garment?" And that person felt like caught up, like that person knew that he was doing something wrong. He should be wearing a wedding garment. So he imagine that you were caught up doing something wrong, and then you just freeze, and then that person became totally silent. So the king says, "Seize this individual, tie his hands and feet, and toss him in the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And then the moral of the story is, many are called, but few are chosen. And then you hear this and say, what's happening? What's happening here? Because it doesn't make sense at the first time. So you have a king invites everyone to a royal wedding. Some people don't want to go. Some people not only don't want to go, they kill the people who invited them. And then the king toss someone in the outer darkness just because they're not wearing a wedding garment. And what sense can we do all of this? So Kardec uh, soon after he puts this parable in the opening of the chapter, he makes a comment saying that no, that disbelievers would smile at this parable, kind of in mockery, because they would say that uh, parables are a story, but they should be somewhat close to reality. And he says that can be said of any fable. And remember, this is the 19th century that the Gospel according to Spiritist was written, and that time fairy tales were kind of popular, not the way that Disney made them, but they were kind of a popular stories to tell like morals to people. So I think he may have referred to that. So if you just hear the story and don't make a sense of it, nothing will make sense to you. It's kind of the same thing here. And we have to remember that parables are probably the most frequent educational resource that Jesus used to tell the people about the Word of God. But anyway, what's the interpretation of this parable? And I'll ask for help here to go on the slides again. As usual. Okay. So the kingdom of heaven would be represented by the wedding feast. Actually, Jesus starts the story by saying the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wants to do a wedding feast for his son, etc., etc., etc. So the wedding feast represents this place, this situation in which everything is happiness and everything is joy and grace. So Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to the wedding feast. And who are the servants of the king? The servants are the prophets, the first prophets who went to tell the people about the word of God and the teachings um, and the teachings of God, the law of God that was at that time until quite unknown. And remember, we have in the story the first invitees, and then at some point, the king invites people outside of the realm. So the first invitees are the Hebrews. And we have to remember that we are talking about a time over 2,000 years ago. And most of the peoples at that time, they were polytheistic. Remember, the Roman Empire was dominant at that time. The Roman Empire, their religion had several gods, for which we name our planets nowadays, like Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, Neptune, etc. But the Hebrews, very interestingly, were the first people to publicly practice monotheism. They came to the belief that there was one God. So it was kind of a soil that was prepared to first receive those teachings and those revelations, the first revelations on the Word of God, mostly by Moses at that time. But remember, there were people that were more worried about their house, their country, and their businesses. And that represents the people who are too much absorbed by material things. They give too much attention to what's going on their material life in detriment of their spiritual evolution. And if we transpose that to our time, this is something that it still happens. How many times we become excessively worried uh, about about material things that are temporary, something that we put too much problem on, and maybe it's not such a big problem. We should be more concerned about our moral development and our spiritual evolution. So I think this is something that still happens nowadays. And then remember, in the story, there are the second invitees, let's put it that way, who are the people on the crossroads outside of the realm. And this represents all other peoples. So that gives the sense that the word of God would not be restricted to the Hebrews. It would be first revealed to the Hebrews, but at some point, that word would spread to all other peoples. And this actually happened. Though Christianity went to be dominant into the Roman Empire and then all over Europe, and we know the story all mostly all over the world. But the most important piece of this parable is the piece of the wedding garment. So remember, in the story, everyone was already in the gala in the hall, uh, but then one person was not wearing the wedding garment, and that person was put away. Uh, so wearing the wedding garment is an allegory for following the law of love and charity. Meaning it doesn't take only for us to say, yes, I believe in the word of God, I believe in the teachings of Jesus. It doesn't take just to say yes to that, saying that to accept it, if that doesn't change your actions in your life. So wearing the wedding garments, that kind of translating a very common Brazilian expression, like wearing the shirt, like actually put that into your core uh, through your actions is what makes you be truly accepted in the kingdom of heaven in the wedding feast. And then like when you read this all this breakdown point by point, like the parable does make sense, and at least for myself. Um, and I think it's still uh, very important today. Still applies today and brings some reflection to us to see how are we incorporating what we learn from the teachings of Jesus in our lives. And then the chapter moves on, talking about another very famous passage of Jesus, which is about the narrow door. So actually, this I kind of summarize here, but Jesus talks about two doors. He first talks about a wide door, which is the door of perdition. And he says that many will enter through it because the path of that door is wide and many people go there. But he mentions about the narrow door, and he says, how small is the door to life? How narrow is the path that leads to it? And how few are there who find it? And he goes on saying, strive to enter through the narrow door, for I assure you that many will try to enter through it, but will not be able to. So what is this? What is this comparison of the wide door and the narrow door? And my my understanding is that we, as human beings and as spirits that have been going on through several existences, we are creatures of habit. We are still very driven by acts of selfishness and pride. And it's very difficult to give up on a habit. First, you have to take conscious of that and make um, a real effort to change a bad habit into something that is better. So that's why Jesus says that the door to perdition is wide, because it's very easy for us to go into that path. We are very used to it. We are still very attached to our pride and selfishness and materialism. But Jesus says, make an effort to go through the narrow door. He says it's difficult. The door is narrow, but you can go through it. And the point that is made in the Gospel according to Spiritism is that if you read this passage, consider that we have only one lifetime, this may seem very unjust, because it would seem like that most of humanity would be condemned, because Jesus says many will go through the door of perdition, just a few ones will go to the through the narrow door. That's the path of life. But if you consider the multiplicity of existences through the reincarnation, we learn with that God gives us as many opportunities we need for us to improve ourselves, to make ourselves better. So no matter how time it takes for us to go through this narrow door, through this narrow path, through the door of life, we have as many opportunities as we need. Then that will fit with the justice of God and the teaching of a loving Father that creates us and wants only the best for us. And then moving forward in the book, there is a group of also very interesting passages. And maybe one very famous is this one, not all those who say, Lord, Lord. And maybe the full sentence is, not all those who say, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the ones who fulfill the will of my Father who is in heaven. And maybe that's one that's most free of allegories and that goes very clear to us into our brain. What Jesus is saying is that it doesn't matter if you just say Lord, Lord, and how many of us, right, and naturally when uh, we get to know the word of Jesus and the word of God, like we recognize his sovereignty and his superiority over us, and naturally will reverence him by saying Lord, Lord, and that happens too at that time. But it doesn't take only to say Lord, Lord, if you do not fulfill the will of God, which means if you do not actually practice his teachings on your daily life. And he goes into comparing someone who hears the words of God and practices them to someone who builds their house upon a rock. So he says, therefore, everyone who hears my words and practices them may be compared to a wise man who built his house upon a rock. And we have this picture of a house upon a rock, but suffering many things from Mother Nature. Let's say that in the picture. There's flooding, there's a storm coming, but because the house is built upon a solid foundation, that house will go through it and will stand still at the end of the storm. So I think we can interpret this by saying that if we practice the teachings of Jesus in our daily lives, if we truly practice love our neighbor as love ourselves and keep our faith in God, we can go through any tribulations that can come to our lives. We can go through any trials or expiations that we have to go through if we really incorporate those teachings to our actions. And Jesus completes this by saying that if someone hears those words and do not practice them, that person can be compared to a foolish man who then built his house upon the sand. And when the storm came, because the house was not built upon a solid foundation, that house is essentially destroyed and goes into great ruin. So that's a very important advice from Jesus, putting out together that again, it's not about only saying that you are a Christian, that you believe, but actually live that through your actions. And again, when reading this, so I thought that I should be very careful by not going to something like fanaticism. That's not what we want, because it's very easy to say to everyone else, oh, you accept the word of Jesus, this, and that. And then it came to my mind about the parable of Good Samaritan, who is told in the gospel a few chapters before that. So remember, the parable of Good Samaritan talks about this Samaritan who is considered an enemy of the Hebrews. It was considered heretic, if I can put it that way. And in that parable, the Samaritan is the only one who helps a man who is on the ground by the road and was beaten up by mugglers. And before the Samaritan arrives, there are two scholars of the law that just see that person needing help and pass by and do not do anything. So you have those people that are scholars that they should know everything. They should know the teachings and the words by heart. But when there was an opportunity to put it into practice, they did not do it. So someone who was considered heretic at that time went there and was the neighbor of that person in need. So just remember that Jesus, when he came and gave his teachings, he was talking about universal truths, truths that resonate within us, which essentially love God above all else and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that resonates with everyone. If you go into other religions, into non-Christian religions, you will find in the core that the teaching is the same, um, even though they may say in different words. But in the very core, the teaching is the same because those are universal truths that resonate within our spirit, and everyone can relate to that. And we know in our heart that if we followed those teachings, we would have a more favorable and peaceful situation in the world. So that's what Kardec says, that Jesus' words are eternal because they are the truth. And Kardec goes even beyond and says, that's why all human political, social, and religious institutions that are based on his words will be as stable as the house built upon the rock. And I don't think here that Kardec was meant to imply that we should have a religious or spiritist state. I don't think that's the goal. But the base of our laws should be based on the respect and love to our neighbors, to all the peoples. And when reading this, I thought about the United Nations, and just because if you remember history, United Nations came after a very troubling time in our history, which was World War II, in an attempt that those terrible events would not happen again. Is it perfect? No, because we're not perfect. But it's a little effort, and I think if we continue to push through it throughout the centuries, we'll eventually make it better. But it's an effort that we should keep pushing on. And then comes a part that I think is very particular to us who are in Spiritism, which is titled Much Will Be Asked of Him Who Has Received Much. So in that particular passage, the apostles are with Jesus, and Jesus was giving his teachings through parables, and then one of them goes to Jesus and says and asks, "Why do you teach them through parables?" And then Jesus says, "Because to them it was not yet allowed to know everything, but for you, like the apostles, it has been allowed to know a little bit more. That's why I talk to them through parables." And he goes and says, "Much you," and he goes by saying that those who have received, sorry, he goes by saying that those who have received much will be asked more. And this is regarding about the responsibility that we have. Once you have received more teachings, you received more knowledge, you become more responsible for your actions. So now you receive all the teachings of Jesus, you're studying a lot, so things start to make more sense to you. And because you have more responsibility to put that as actions in your life. And more will be asked of you, more will be demanded of you, because now you should put that into action. And then in this second part, that the second phrase that I put here on this slide, that's the phrase of Jesus that he directs to the Pharisees. So just remember, the Pharisees were kind of a political party at the time within the Hebrews, that they were scholars of the law. They were probably the most knowledgeable people within the Hebrew people that knew about the law, all the specificities, but they mostly used that for their pride and selfishness and to exert power over other people. And Jesus very frequently unmasked them by revealing their hypocrisy. And the Pharisees actually had Jesus as an enemy. So Jesus at one point says, if you were blind, you would not have sinned. By saying, if you didn't know, um, you would not be in search of a wrongdoing. That's essentially what he's saying. But you now say that you see and say, but you study, you know what you're doing. And that's why the sin remains in you. So what he's saying is that this is more serious because you know the law in detail and you're still breaking the law consciously. So you will be held more responsible for that. And as I say, this is very particular for us because in Spiritist, um, Kardec, with the help of the spirits, he decodified in very much detail in initially those 5 books, uh, all the teachings of the spirits, and explaining very clearly uh, the teachings of Jesus that we had forgotten or that we had not understood yet. So by making this knowledge clearer to us and make this more understandable to our minds, we become more responsible by practicing those teachings. Because, well, essentially say we should know better. Now we know better, we have to, follow this in our lives. But on this part, there is a very good advice that says the first thought of all sincere spiritists should be to find out if in the spirit's counsels there's not something that might apply to themselves. So every time that we are here listening to a lecture, or that we are at our homes doing the gospel at home, or when you hear the opening message of the lecture, or you're gonna do your prayer and you read the gospel, etc. Just think if what you're reading doesn't have anything that could be applied to you, to a situation in your life. And most often, there will be something that you can apply because nothing's by chance. Like, and when you ask for help, for counsels, when you truly ask, be sure that that will be received. I think that's a very good advice, and that speaks to our responsibility. Like, if you are hearing that, how does that can apply to my daily life? How can I get out of here and actually practice with other people? And then we're going into the final parts of this chapter, which are the Spirit's teachings. And there are 2 topics on that part. One is to him who already has, more will be given. And there is this phrase of Jesus where he says, for him to For to him who already has, more will be given, and he will have in abundance. But regarding him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. So that seems very paradoxical to us. And that is probably because we have our material bias when interpreting this. Uh, when you read this for the first time, you may think, what is Jesus saying? He's saying that the richer get richer and the poor are getting poorer. So, no, it's not about being rich or poor in our material life. We have to remember that Jesus taught about the spiritual life. That's the life that we should be focused on. So, what is the one who already has? Is the one that has received the teachings and makes an effort to apply them. So, when we receive those teachings and we actually try in our daily lives to apply them, uh, God sees our effort and grants us and help and aid to keep on that path, to keep on the path of the narrow door. Let's put it that way. When we practice good deeds, when we practice love and charity towards everyone around us, that resonates within the spiritual world, and be sure that good spirits will be in contact with us. So that's what it means. Like the more you do, the more you will receive, the more grace you receive. And who's the one that who does not have or has little? That's the one who refuses or does not want to apply the teaching. So by their own choice, someone may say, I don't want to know about this, or I don't want to apply this, like this, the invitees in the parable that decided not to go into the wedding feast. It was given to them, but at their own choice, they refused it. So it's like they never had it. However, they may reacquire that by changing their path, making a different choice, follow the law of love and charity. And even though probably many of us decided to refuse those teachings in the past, we each life have an opportunity to follow the path that Jesus laid out to us, and we have as many opportunities as we need to make ourselves better. And almost closing the chapter, there's this message about entitled Christians shall be recognized by their deeds. And I think that couldn't be clearer. True Christians will be recognized by their actions, by their attitudes towards other people, and how they show themselves by their action to others. And the spirits in this passage, they compare Christianity to a tree with several branches, with large branches that should cover, that should cover all over the world. And Christianity being a good tree, it would bear good fruits. And the fruits that it would bear would be fruits of faith, of love, and charity. And the Spirit said that anyone could go under that tree and take these fruits, but the problem is the gardeners. Uh, the gardeners sometimes are not good. Uh, Sometimes we want to mold the teachings of Jesus to our own view. And if you think about the story of Christianity, this happened for a long time, and if we can identify still situations where this happens, in which people use the teachings of Jesus for their own benefit. They use those teachings to exert power over other people and to exert domination. And there's some point in the gospel where it's not in this particular chapter, but in which they say that if the teachings had been followed from the beginning, many situations of war because of religion would not have happened. So the gardeners who are us, sometimes we're not good gardeners. And in the past, as humanity, we have not been good gardeners. And what happens is that when you don't treat a tree very well, it will become dry and will not give the fruits that it should be. So that explains why so many people turn their back to religion as institutions, and a consequence of that is that they turn away from the teachings of Jesus. They become, disbelievers in a certain way, and because when they went to seek for the fruits of love and charity, the fruits were not there because we're not taking care of the tree. The difference that here the tree exists independently of the gardens, and the tree will always be there. And we always have opportunity to take better care of it. The way that we take better care of it is by our actions. Uh, so if by our actions we demonstrate that we are true Christians who respect their neighbor, love their neighbor, who practice the law of love and charity, and try our best to do that without measure, um, we will make this tree grow back again and bear their fruits. And with that, we'll be truly disciples of Jesus by practicing his words, not by pushing his word through the throat of someone, but by our actions, by how we behave towards everyone else. And with this, I think we can close, and I'm open for any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Thiago, for this enlightening lecture today. Um, it requires us more responsibility, more discipline to keep on the path of the narrow door for sure. Any questions, comments?
We have just a comment here from the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It's from Larissa. She says, "Hi everyone, I need to thank for this moment of learning. Excellent topic, amazing lecture."
Thank you, Larissa. Thank you for watching us. So I think with that, we are going to close our lecture today. For those who are watching us via the internet, please do your prayer, and we see you next Sunday again.